Hello, my name is Nell, and I have things to say about disability, chronic illness, and mental health. I live with all of these things, and here in my videos on my channel, I talk about them with openness and honesty. If that sounds like something that interests you, I would love it if you would subscribe to the channel. Come back every second Wednesday when I upload new videos. Let me know what you think of my videos in the comments section, and if you know of somebody who would benefit from or enjoy one of my videos, please feel free to share it with them. Today, I will be talking about the very serious topic of deaths in NDIS custody. Because it is serious and because there are a lot of facts that I want to get right, I will be reading partially off a script, so please forgive me for that. On May 23rd, 2019, Myrna Apram, a woman with autism and epilepsy, had a bath in the residential disability facility that she was living in. Due to her epilepsy, she should not have been having a bath unsupervised. However, she was left alone for 25 minutes. The door was left ajar and she locked herself in. When the staff realised she was still in there, they tried to communicate with her, but she did not respond. The staff used a kitchen knife to dismantle the door handle and entered the bathroom. Myrna was found unresponsive in a bathtub full of water and vomit. According to reports, emergency services were not called for more than 20 minutes. She later died. It was later revealed that the two staff members looking after Myrna and the two residents at the residential facility had not worked at this facility before. They also didn't know that Myrna had epilepsy or a history of seizures, or that she had any risk of harm while bathing and that she should be supervised. The organisation whose care Myrna was in is called AFFORD, which stands for the Australian Foundation for Disability. They have since been fined $400,000 for two contraventions of the NDIS Act by the NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commission. They admitted that they were negligent and careless, but denied that their conduct was deliberate or reckless. In information that was released later, we learned that a team leader from AFFORD noted that Apram needs all medical forms completed by a GP just days before she moved into the facility. And I believe she moved into that facility that year. This doesn't appear to have been followed up on. AFFORD neglected to review her requirements via a health assessment and didn't enforce a management plan for her epilepsy. All of this neglect led to the death of a 20-year-old woman. This death was absolutely avoidable. It was avoidable with some paperwork and some communication. I look at this situation and I honestly don't know how it could occur. I have incredibly mild asthma, but my organisation still have me fill in an asthma management plan, even though their staff play basically no part in helping me manage it, beyond possibly passing me an inhaler from my handbag if I need it when we're out and about. But it's a condition that I have, therefore the requirement is that there is documentation for it. Even knowing that the staff had to force the door open with a kitchen knife. In a disability facility, there should never be a way for a resident to lock themselves into a room without staff being able to get in. That should not be an option. After looking into this case further, I found more information about AFFORD. In an article from the Sydney Morning Herald, published in March of this year, the behaviour of AFFORD is condemned. It focused on growth at the expense of safety and quality of services and inhibited staff from raising concerns about operations, the Commission found. There was also evidence of a support worker who was employed by AFFORD who abused two disabled men under his care, and evidence of AFFORD not providing adequate response to this case or taking steps to safeguard against this kind of abuse in the future. This worker, Daniel Numali, was convicted of multiple offences, including 22 counts of intentionally recording an intimate image without consent. The Commission criticised the structure of the organisation, labelling it dysfunctional, and the CEO approached his job in a narcissistic and single-minded manner. When I was looking at this case, I was reminded of the 2020 case of Anne-Marie Smith, a woman with cerebral palsy who was meant to be receiving round-the-clock care, but who was instead left in a cane chair in her home. with all of her needs neglected, to the point where she passed away from septic shock, multiple organ failure, and malnourishment. She was not moved from her chair. She was not assisted with toileting properly. She was not cleaned properly. She was not fed properly. She was not provided with medical care. She had severe pressure wounds that had become necrotic. Her flesh was dying. Her carer could not care for her, or did not care for her, or would not care for her. For whatever reason, whether it was apathy, whether it was inexperience, but instead of speaking up and finding somebody else to do the job, she collected her pay and left this woman to slowly die. After Anne-Marie Smith passed away on the 6th of April 2020, the organisation did not inform the NDIS of the death of a client in their care. 10 days after the death, Smith's carer was granted a Working with Vulnerable People screening, allowing her to continue working. And after the death was discovered and investigated, $35,000 worth of personal belongings were found missing from Smith's home. Her car, which Smith was unable to drive due to her health, had been used extensively and had racked up multiple fines, and $70,000 worth of irregular spending was missing from Smith's inheritance. This support worker, Rosa Maria Maione, working with Integrity Care, was eventually sentenced to 6 years, 7 months, and 5 days in prison for criminal neglect. Criminal neglect, not manslaughter, I guess. 2 of the directors of the organisation, Amy June Collins and Alison Marie Virgo, were also charged with criminal neglect. The organisation itself was fined more than $12,000 for failing to report Smith's death. It lost its registration and received a banning order, as well as also being charged with criminal neglect. Criminal neglect. How the fuck does this happen? These places are being punished, sure. We have one place being fined $400,000 for the loss of one life. A loss that could have been avoided with some paperwork and some communication. 2 workers who should never have been working at a place for the first time on their own. You should never have You should never have 2 workers inexperienced working somewhere for the first time. That should never happen. You should always have somebody who is experienced with that should never happen. You should never have people unaware of a person's need for supervision. That should never happen. You should never have a condition that doesn't have a management plan. That should never happen. Another loss of life. A person sent to prison for 6 years for criminal neglect because somebody died. A loss of life. An extended loss of life. It took a long time for Anne-Marie Smith to die. She sat in a chair day after day, dying, with her body falling to pieces, her flesh opening up, dying. A loss of life that could have been avoided with some accountability and checks if somebody else had just checked on Anne-Marie Smith. Instead of sending the same person. These situations should be impossible. However, when disability organisations and when providing disability care is seen as a business, then the disabled people themselves are essentially seen as the product. And when the product is lost or damaged, that's a damn shame. And then we'll try to improve our process for next time. And you offer compensation for loss of product. Something that is also extremely frustrating is that these are reportedly some of the first times that the NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commission has fined service providers, but I am absolutely sure it's not the first time that service providers have made some heinous mistakes. And if the punishment is, for the most part, a slap on the wrist and a stern word, what incentive is there for service providers to improve their systems and protect their vulnerable clients? We shouldn't need to punish any of this because it shouldn't happen. All of this should be caught way before it gets this far. Workers should be monitored. Clients' care should be monitored. Paperwork requirements should be strictly followed and met. People's lives depend on it. People shouldn't be dying. When they're being cared for, people shouldn't have to be afraid. Because there was another death. Just in February last year, I did a quick Google of NDIS deaths while writing my notes, just out of curiosity. A non-verbal woman, Kaya Lucas, had a disorder which, among other things, caused her skin to be unusually thin. She required baths that had a very, very particular temperature. Workers were running her a bath and just tested it with their hands and thought, yeah, that should be fine, and put Kaya in the bath. It was too hot, and her skin started to burn, and she was in pain, and she couldn't tell them because she's non-verbal. She died in a hospital 5 years later from burns. She died from a bath because they couldn't respect that they needed to just go through one extra step of putting a thermometer in this bath. I myself have had experiences where somebody has forgotten to put brakes on my shower chair. And I have pointed it out, and they've just kind of laughed it off. And I've had to point out, you do realize I could break bones here, right? You frighten me because I could break bones. People putting somebody else at risk when your entire life... It shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen. The people who are providing care should be the most careful, the most respectful, the most detail-oriented people. I have met some of the most careless people who are in support work, and it is frightening. And I can absolutely believe that this stuff happens because some people just don't care. It needs... I am planning to do another video that is specifically on the NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commission because they're bullshit. There are so many problems with them. And it's just taking more time and energy and research than I expected. So I need to give myself some time. But thank you for watching. Stay safe. Bless.